For security, you have to have a predictable environment in which an individual or a group may pursue its ends without disruption or harm and without fear of disturbance or injuries. Assets are the people and the items that the company needs, that the organization that we work for needs to stay in business. That is our business. We help keep these people secure, we help keep their properties secure. Part of the way we keep them secure is through access control. Probably the main part of what we do is access control. It involves in using a combined strategy of the geography or the land, the terrain or the lay of the land, spatial characteristics, and I don't mean spatial like special ed, but I mean spatial as in the space that you work with, natural patterns of movement, and security personnel in conjunction with mechanical systems like locks, keys, gates, and many other mechanical devices that Cramer Security is actually adding into or starting to use more and more in the security field. Now we're going to start with the basic security functions. Building and perimeter security. It's going to be very important for you. Most of our properties, this is what we're doing. We're taking care of buildings and the perimeter of those buildings. Again, we go back to access control, and the reason we go back there, it's very important. Intrusion detection. We have to make sure that if there is an intruder once we're on site, that we know about it. Alarm and surveillance system control and monitoring. We make sure that the instruments that we do have at our use are properly used. Fire detection and suppression. We also respond to fires. Many of the mine areas, many of the industrial areas, fire protection is something that is very crucial to us. That can be a big loss to the company we're working for, and therefore it's a big concern for us. Emergency and disaster response and control. We have had emergency situations in some of the areas we work in. We have to have you ready to respond to those. Accident prevention and safety monitoring is a very crucial part of Cramer Security. We use the rules and regulations to prevent accidents and make sure that all the safety regulations are being met. The building and perimeter security. Building security. First of all, you want to always check the buildings at the first of your shift. Make sure that everything is secured. At unpredictable times, recheck them. Don't make this every 5 minutes, every 10 minutes. Make it unpredictable. Document each check accurately and timely. This is something you're going to hear. It's going to become redundant for you, but we want you to document everything. Perimeter security. You want to always check the perimeter at the first of your shift. Continually scan and watch the perimeter. If it's clear after you've checked it at the first of your shift and something changes, then you know you've got a problem. Document each check accurately and timely. Access control. Again, I'm going to go over access control because it's one of the biggest parts of our job. We must reasonably know who is on the property that we are securing. Approach the people and identify any person or vehicle you see. Let them know you're aware of their presence. If they know that you're aware of their presence, then they're going to be less likely to try to pull something on you or take something from the property. We must log who is on property for records. Intrusion and detection. If a secured area that you know was secured when you come on and did your first check is now open, you must assume that you have a problem. If you do have a problem, you need to raise your sense of alertness. Watch for anything. Listen, use your ears. Document everything you see, everything you hear. If it becomes necessary, call for assistance. Don't be shy about calling for assistance. We don't want you out there on your own. Alarm and surveillance systems. Many of our posts that we have now either have alarm systems for CO2, fire, some of them that even have intrusion alarms. You need to know your site. Know what you're supposed to do. Sometimes you'll be filling in for other guards who may be sick or something, some reason that they're not there. You need to know that site. Surveillance systems are a real possibility in many of our locations. These surveillance systems are set up by somebody that Cramer Security works closely with. If you have questions on the surveillance systems, ask. We have a new thing called a pin check system. It will be used in many of our locations. Don't become so reliant on the pin check that you don't do your job. Fire responsibilities. We have to watch for fire. We have to detect the fire. Keep a close watch. Take notice of odd smells. You know how to detect smells of fire. You know how to listen for sounds of fire. Treat the area that you're in as if it was your home. Maybe even better than your home because you're being paid to watch this one. Even sounds can be important. Fire responsibilities can be as much as suppression. You have to know where the fire extinguishers are. Locate those fire extinguishers. Know where they are when you come in. Make sure that if you're on a new site, that's one of the first things that you find. If it's possible, if a fire occurs, we want you to extinguish it or put it out. Don't take on a big fire with a small fire extinguisher. We don't expect you to put yourself in danger. The best case is to call for emergency response. Do all that, and then we want you to document and call your supervisor. Emergency and disaster response and control. First and foremost, call for the appropriate first responders. First responders may be the police, they may be the fire, they may be ambulance, rescue. Oftentimes, the person you will call will quite simply be 911. Again, know your location. If you don't have a telephone right there, and there are some locations that don't, we will have you some kind of communications. Be sure you know how to get a hold of first responders. And then, call your supervisor within Cramer Security. Call the mine supervisors. Make sure that you've determined with the mine supervisors if they want to call MSHA or if they want you to call them. Document each of these things. When you called your supervisor, what mine supervisor you called, and exactly what they said. Accident prevention, safety monitoring. Another important part of what we do. This is something in the private security field that a lot of people don't realize, but we are a very important part of accident prevention and their safety monitoring. First, and the most simple, if you see a problem, a simple safety problem, fix it. Don't look around for somebody else that you can boss or somebody that you can direct to do it. If it's something real simple, maybe as simple as picking up a carelessly misplaced chain or shutting a fire door, if you see something like that, just fix the problem. Document that you did it so that if there's questions about why a door got shut or why something got moved, it's documented. But simple fixes, just do it. Be smart. Watch how things work around you. We expect you to be a part of the solution where you're at. Wherever you're stationed, wherever your duty station is, we want you to be a part of a solution for them. Being part of the solution may be as easy as the rules and regulations. Different sites have some different rules and regulations. One site may have you documenting every person that comes in. Another site may just have you documenting the vehicles. Know the rules that apply in the area that you're securing. Keep it simple. Do your job. If you follow the rules, it can save more problems than could reasonably be foreseen. Oftentimes, you may not even realize some of the problems you've solved just by simply doing the job that you're supposed to do at the site you're on. And again, document every action. Our next section is the role of the security officer. The role that I want to talk to you right now about is the role where we prevent loss and create a secure workplace. Any crime requires certain aspects. There's some of these that we can prevent, some of them we can't do anything about. The first thing that a crime requires is it requires somebody to have a desire, A person wants to commit that act. They weigh out the possibilities and then they have the desire to commit the act. We can't do much about that area. The skill, their ability to commit the act. Well, we hope they're not very skillful. That makes our job a lot easier, but we can't do anything about that. The third part of a crime is the opportunity. This is where we make a difference. Our job is to ruin all their opportunities, so they either take the crime someplace else or they forget completely about it. There are 13 elements of a security officer's duties. You may think of others, and they may be very important, but these are the 13 elements within this training that we want you to focus on. First of all, protect buildings and the areas you're assigned to. Don't be overly concerned about areas that you're not assigned to. You can keep a lookout for them, but don't be overly concerned. Enforce the rules and regulations of your duty area. Again, of your duty area. Direct traffic, vehicular and foot traffic. Maintain order and assist people. Remember that we're there to assist people. A lot of people worry about maintaining order and not assisting people. Familiarize yourself with the special and general orders of Cramer security. Supervise and enforce systems of identification. Don't let these identification tags go if you're not supposed to. Inspect all the areas within your assigned duty. You're going to act for management. Now that means that you're acting in the way that they want you to, the directions that they give you. Report incidents. Make sure you document everything. Sound alarms and respond to fires. The next one is a good one. Log and turn in lost or unclaimed property. Please, if you find unclaimed property, log it and turn it in. Don't think it's yours because you found it. This can be a big problem. Make full and exact reports to supervisors. We don't want a bunch of fluff, but we want all the facts. Assist with emergency planning. If you see a problem, let your supervisor know. They're going to take your suggestions. You're the one working here all the time. The next section is professionalism. Cramer Security has some pretty high expectations. We're proud of what and who we offer. The company reflects on who we are. Tim expects outstanding conduct from you. We want you to feel like a professional. We don't want you to be walking around saying, I'm just a security guard. No, you're a professional security officer. That's why Mr. Booth provides all this training. What does it mean to be a professional? Well, first of all, you need to be proud of your job. You may think that this job isn't going to take you anyplace. I hope that's not the case. This job can be very important to you, and I'm telling you right now, it's crucial for the people that you are working for. In your job, you're making an honest living for yourself. You're working for yourself, but many of you have families. You're working for your family too. Your conduct reflects on you, and it reflects on your family. Let's break down the word professional. As I go through these, each letter is the beginning of the letters in the word professional. P stands for precise. Be precise in what you say and in what you do. R stands for responsive. You need to respond to the things that's going on around you. O is for objective. You want to be objective in the things you do. Don't let your own personal views get in the way of doing your job objectively. F, that means for factual. Use only the facts in your reports, and if you have to tell somebody what happened, use only the facts. Ethical, that's for the E. That's where we want to get into the things such as turning in lost property. We need good ethical people. Sincere, be yourself. Don't try to be somebody else. We hope that the people we hire are sincere in the good personalities that they have. The second S stands for strive for perfection. We know that you're not going to be perfect all the time, but be perfect as the person you are. I stands for informed. Read your logs. Read the duty log from the person before you. Make sure you're well informed of what's going on each and every day. O for observant. Don't be standing there half asleep when you're on duty. Don't be sitting there half asleep. Be observant of what's going on. It could save your life. N stands for neat. Nobody likes a sloppy uniform. Be neat in your appearance. A is for accommodating. If you can help somebody out, don't think it's not my job. It is what we expect of you in your job. Accommodate. And L stands for loyal. Cramer Security expects you to be loyal to Cramer Security. Some of the practical tactics that you can use. First of all, just use your good common sense. Keep work-related information as confidential. Remember when I said we expect you to be loyal? There's no big top secret issues, but there's no reason to go spreading around everything you see. As a security officer, at times you will see things that you just need to keep within our logs and within Cramer Security, and then if it needs to be used, it will be. When you go home, leave the work at work. If somebody asks you how it went, it's fine to tell them, oh, it was a rough day or it was a long day. But if you see something going on there, just say, well, we had some activity, but we took care of it. Keep the stuff at work. If you're asked at work about events, make sure it's somebody with a need to know for the information. Oftentimes people will try to stir trouble by getting information from you. Stop the rumor mill by not adding, starting, or continuing rumors. Rumors are something that is detrimental to any company, and with Cramer Security you can be dismissed for continuing rumors. Stay focused on the task at hand. The task at hand may be as simple as staying awake and alert. Sometimes that's the most difficult task to stay focused on. Whatever your task, whether it's busy or whether it's easy, stay focused. The task at hand may get busy all of a sudden. You have to be ready to multitask. If you've got people coming in all from a shift change, you have to be ready to handle that shift change. Remember to keep your priorities in line. Make sure that you remember what you're protecting and what's important and what's not. Conduct yourself as if somebody is watching you. We very well may be. We keep a close watch on our sites. It's not that we don't trust you, but if we can tell people that hire us that we as supervisors continually check on you, then they know that your conduct is going to be within standards that they will accept. Remember, again, somebody is usually watching you. A lot of times the people that are watching you are the people that we work for, their employees, the ones that you're keeping track of. They constantly call or email and they ask, do you know what your officer was doing? Do you know what they did do? Did you know what they didn't do? We constantly get emails about that. That's why we want you to document everything. To enforce and apply the rules, you must know what they are. Make sure that you know the rules for each individual post that you're working at. Some of you are working at different posts. Keep straight the rules and regulations for the post you're on. Read the memos that get posted on the boards at the different work sites. Make sure that you know if something new has come up that you're taking care of it. If you don't know, ask a supervisor. If you're unclear on an issue, ask a second time. There is no stupid question. In this job, you may have to talk to the police. If there's an event happens on your shift, you very well may have to answer some questions. Be prepared to answer the questions about anything that goes on. If a police officer comes around, talk to them. Some of the clues from my many years of experience in police work to help you feel a little more comfortable is, first of all, when you're talking to them, stand up straight. Look them in the eyes. I don't mean stare them down, but look them in the eyes. Don't be looking away and afraid to look at them. Be honest and don't add a bunch of fluff. They don't want to hear about how great of a security officer that you are. They want you to show them by giving them the facts and eliminating the fluff. Don't assume anything. If you're unsure of something, just say, I'm not sure. If you don't know, don't make it up. Simply answer, I don't know. If you forgot something, stick with the facts that you remember. Later, if something reminds you of another fact, then just tell them, oh yeah, this just came to my mind. But stick with the facts. Keep your uniform neat and clean. People notice how you look. Going back to the police officer thing, police officers really notice how you look because usually the professional police officer expects to see somebody professional. Keep your uniform neat and clean. You can go 29 days out of a month and be completely squared away. Then you have one sloppy day, and that's the day that the supervisor for the entire mines comes in and he sees you. And that's the mark that you don't want on your record. Every day is important. Just keep yourself squared away. Don't keep adding extras. Professional does not mean outrageous. I had an officer at one point in time who kept wanting to add all kinds of stuff. He looked like some jewelry store and not a security officer. The regulations tell you what's supposed to be on your uniform. Stay with that. Stay informed. What is going on where you work? Now that doesn't mean the rumor mill, but it does mean if you see people arguing, make a little note to it. It could become important. Just make it in your logs, don't get into detail, make a note, maybe what they're arguing about, or if it was heated, or if it was just a simple verbal argument. What's going on with Cramer security? Again, there's a difference in staying informed and listening to gossip. If you read all of your memos, if you talk to your supervisor, don't shy away from supervisors. If you listen to your other officers and you read their notes, then you'll be informed of what's going on with Cramer security. You'll know what you need to know to be an exemplary officer. Remember your role with Cramer security. Do not belittle yourself. Do not belittle your importance to Cramer security. Remember that you're important to those that we protect. Your actions affect everybody, not just you. Quality shows. Live up to and exceed the expectations. Mr. Booth has a high set of expectations for anybody that's around him. Not impossible, but he has a high set of expectations. You offer quality, or you wouldn't be here. The quality protection with a quality employer is what we advertise. It's what we expect. It's what Mr. Booth demands. You need to be sure that you are a symbol of that quality. When you're doing your job by the policy, doing your job with the respect that's expected, we'll back you up 100%. If you're not doing your job, you will not have this company's backing. Let's move on to level 1 training. There's a training guide manual. We may be using it, we may not. If you don't have the training guide manual, that's okay. Most of the time, you don't go through it page by page anyway. But under Unit 5, we'll now start looking at patrol and fixed posts. Your student objectives, or the things that you are expected to learn from this, is you need to understand the elements of the patrol function. You need to learn to understand and use good patrol techniques. And we're going to teach you some techniques. It's not just as simple as wandering around out there or driving around out there. You need to understand the elements of fixed post duty. You need to understand the importance of observation and perception. A little later we're going to get into that, but there is a difference between observation and perception. And I'll expound on that just a little bit more later. The common purposes of patrol. First of all, detection of criminal or unauthorized activity. Second of all, we have the prevention and deterrence of crime. They may seem like they're the same, they're not. We need to ensure the compliance with organizational policy, both with Cramer security policy and with the company that we secure. We have to assess, report, and record loss-causing situations or circumstances. While you're doing that, as you're recording it, if you have some suggestion how to remedy the loss, go ahead and add that in your report. We need to handle calls as they're assigned to us. Different areas may have you handle a call in a different situation. We have to test and inspect the physical security systems. We act as a compensatory measure. We compensate for any shortcomings in the security that's around us. We respond to emergencies. If somebody's hurt, if there's a crash, there can be a number of different kinds of emergencies. We respond to them and see what's needed. Performance of other duties as required. Sometimes there's just going to be other things that just don't fit in our little list. Now we're going to look at the two types of patrol. First of all, some of you will be on foot patrol. You're walking an area. 8, 10, 12 hours you're walking an area. Sometimes this is the easiest one to stay awake for, but it's the most tiring. Make sure that you stay alert and make sure you know your surroundings. Another one is the mobile patrol. Some of you will have vehicles to drive in. A little easier to get around in. Make sure you stay awake. That's one of our big issues. Now we're going to go over the techniques of patrol. The key to success of patrol has to do with the elimination of opportunity for a criminal to commit a criminal act. Remember back when I said it takes the opportunity for a crime to happen, and that's what we want to eliminate? Your patrols are a big part of eliminating those opportunities. There are some principles for patrols. 4 of them from this training that we expect you to understand. First of all, there's a random fashion. The officer patrol should be unpredictable. You need to double back. You need to not set any kind of certain way that you do it every evening. You need to have random frequencies. Cover the areas, every area in your assigned duty, but you must be at random times. Don't set it every half hour, every 10 minutes. It's too easy to predict, too easy to get around you then. Communication is extremely crucial to patrolling. There's different available techniques to advise others where you're at, where you will be, and what's going on. Some areas you'll have radios, some areas you'll have telephones. Make sure you know what's available to you. Documentation. There's that word again. Write everything down. Even the things that are good that you see. Sometimes you need to put them in there so the next shift will know what to use. A professional officer can do a number of things with observation and perception. They can see a problem developing. Make sure you take notice when a problem is starting to develop. They can give an accurate description. Don't leave anything out, but don't add anything. You can identify indicators of deception. If you ask somebody about a problem and they seem to be deceiving you, make sure that you indicate that. Be confident in your abilities. We're training you to be a professional officer. Be confident in that ability. In being a professional officer, you need to be sure that you use most, maybe not all, but most of your senses. First of all, use your sight. Visibility depends on some different aspects from where you're at. The distance from where you are to where the thing that you're observing comes from. The size. How big is what you're seeing? The illumination. Lighting is crucial in many of the areas that we have, and sometimes the lighting is not the best. Make sure that you leave room for the fact that the lighting may change as you're watching something happen. Some of the problems that you may face with the sense of sight are your position and your perception. Your positioning on the area that you are watching over may cause problems with the perception of the events that's happening. The next sense that you'll be using is your hearing. I know that seems like it's something simple, but too many people don't actually listen. You hear things, but you don't actually listen to them. If you've got a spouse, you know what I mean. Hearing and listening are two different things. We want you to do both. We want you to hear what's going on. We want you to listen to what's going on. You should be able to differentiate and recognize basic sounds. There are some sounds that are very basic to the area that you work in. Activity sounds, movements, machinery that you know belongs there, footsteps up a hallway. These are all activity sounds. Then you have voices. Listen for unique characteristics in the voices. If you think about it, you know what I mean. You can recognize somebody's voice when you know them. That's because of their unique characteristics. Motors and engines, vehicles, large fans. These vehicles are often very different in sound. A small car as opposed to a big truck. The fan that cools an area as opposed to the machinery that's working outside. Sounds of firearms as opposed to firecrackers or backfires. These are all things that you have to understand there is some difference to and know what those differences are. Your sense of smell. Make sure that you use your sense of smell. It can be one of your danger indicators. Be aware of the odors around you. Pay particular attention to unusual or changing odors. Identify dangerous odors such as gasoline, smoke. Some areas that we work in may have chemicals in them. If the air starts smelling different, then you have to be aware that there could be chemicals that's causing that. We don't want you in a dangerous situation. Make sure that you pay attention to your sense of smell. Remember, continued exposure to some smells dulls your senses. If you're working in an area where there is some gasoline, you'll get dulled to that smell. If that smell gets real strong, you may not notice it. Pay attention to what's going on around you. Your sense of touch can be very important. As you're walking around on foot patrol, or even if you're driving around, you get out. Feel for heat on doors and walls. That can tell you if there's activity inside there. It can tell you if there's fire inside of a room. Heat from a car hood. If there's a car sitting there and you're just not sure if it should be there, feel the hood. If it's warm, that car has just recently pulled up there, especially in the colder weather. Pulse of people. That may sound simple, but how many times do you see people walk up on somebody who's laying there and they're asking them if they're okay, but they don't even check? Your sense of touch is very important. Now remember when I told you that there was not all of the senses that you would use? The next sense I'm going to mention, I don't want you using on the job for indicating if there's a problem. Your sense of taste. Do not use your sense of taste to see if there's a problem with something. Too many times people see things that they've seen on TV. They try to use the sense of taste that they've seen on TV. I've always despised the TV shows where the police officer walks up and sees if it's a drug by tasting it. If you smell something, don't go up and taste it to see if it's acid. I know that seems simple. Believe it or not, there are people that do silly things, such as tasting something that could be very hazardous or even deadly. Don't use the sense of taste. The next thing we're going to go over is what's called the OODA loop. I could try to pronounce it as ODA, but that wouldn't make much sense. So let's just stick with the OODA loop. The first O is for observe what is going on. The second O is for orient yourself to the threat and weigh your options. The D is for decide what to do and then do it. Decide and do. Act is for the A. Act quickly, decisively, and completely. Make sure that whatever you see and decide to do, you put it into action. Too many times you see people get hurt because they recognize a problem, they stand around and look at it, and before they actually act on what they've decided to do, something bad happens. The OODA system was developed with fighter pilots in mind. They use it in emergency situations. Emergency personnel as well. They use this to observe and perceive what's going on. You cannot afford to ignore these basic rules. Nothing is routine. Even on a day where things seem really, really quiet, nothing is routine. What are people around you doing? Make sure that you take notice. And if they leave the area, make sure that you take notice that they've left the area and then when they've come back. Know where you are. Make sure that where you are positioned is where you're supposed to be. Don't start wandering off looking at things. Know what the people around you are saying. Make sure that as they're talking, you understand if voices are being raised, or quite honestly, if they start talking about where you are, raise your alertness. Know where your cover is at all times. Cover quite simply means if something starts going bad, you know where to get out of the way but still be able to see things. Use everything available to help your observations. Whatever you have in your area that you're responsible for, you need to figure out how you can use it to make sure that you're safe and that you can observe things. Now the difference in observation and perception. Observation always comes before perception. You have to see it, and then you perceive or figure out what it means. Observe. That is to see it and you're aware of it. I observe that this exists. Perception. I acquire a meaning of the observation and then decide what I'm going to do with it. Factors that are affecting your observation. First of all, objects tend to be grouped together in action. If you see two cars getting ready to hit each other, you no longer see two cars, you see one incident. You have to look to the center of that action and then work your way out and break it down, and this has to be done quickly. Perception, you have problems with dimensions. A big truck is going fast. A sports car is going fast. Then if you see a sedan, it doesn't look like it's going as fast, but it's right there with the other two. Things that are big, things that look like they are sporty, they look like they're fast. That's just an example of perception problems. A stressful event causes things to seem worse. You need to slow down. I don't mean walk slower, I mean slow yourself down inside and calm your decisions down. Too many people overreact and it causes more of a problem than they are a help. Emotions can distort perception. Stay calm. Focus on what the stimulus is. In other words, if there's an accident, focus on the things that you know is important. Stay detached. Gather the facts and don't have any kind of assumptions or emotions of your own that play into what's happening. Now we're going to go on to some of your patrol tactics. Before we talked about patrol techniques, now we want to tell you what tactics we want you to use. First of all, check your physical location. Make sure you know where you are at all times. Be prepared to respond to incidents. Make sure that anything that comes up, or at least anything that's foreseeable, you can handle. Carry your needed equipment. Make sure you have a flashlight if it's dark. Make sure you have a pen if you're checking people in. These can be real embarrassing and catch you off guard. Vary your routine. Change the times and routes that you take. I know this is redundant, I've said it before, but double back instead of circling around each time. We don't want people to know where you're at all times. That can lead to somebody either being able to get into the area you're securing or lead to a dangerous situation where they can jump you and take you out of the scene completely. Make sure that you're briefed before the shift starts. Read the prior logs. Know what was on the duty ahead of you. With that in mind, here's some of the things that you want to know when you are on duty. Make sure that you know the layout of the facility. Make sure that you know the area that you're guarding and if it differs from the last time you worked there. The habits of the people and where they belong. If there's somebody not where they belong, there could be a problem. Routine occurrences. What is normal and what is not normal for the area that you are in? If you're supposed to check alarms, make sure that you know the alarm testing procedures. Again, this is all part of why you have to know your duty station that you're assigned for the day. Emergency response procedures. Some places have different response procedures. You may have to call 911 or you may have to call individual places. Make sure you know what to do in an emergency. Now let's talk some about fixed posts. First of all, know your objective on the fixed post. Know the duties of your location. Over half of our posts that we secure are fixed posts. It may be at a guard shack, it may be in a hallway of a building. It all depends on what you're securing, but make sure you know what you are securing. Do not fall into a routine causing lax or sloppy work habits. Too many times People are caught dozing off, people are caught sleeping, and I'm telling you, that will lead to a dismissal. Some of the basic essential duties when you come on to a shift: check your communications. Make sure that at the beginning of your shift it's working. Ask the shift ahead of you, have the batteries been charged? Have the batteries been used a lot? Make sure that you know the post equipment at the beginning of your shift. Make sure you know what's available to you. In the middle of emergency is not a good time to find out that you don't have everything you feel you need. Check all the paperwork at the beginning of the shift. If you can, get in there a little early just to make sure all the paperwork you're going to need is there, and check over the stuff from the shift ahead of you. Read and understand all the post orders. Some of the posts have different orders for them. Keep your post neat and clean. Post orders or notices are for offices only. Some can be sensitive. We don't want it spread all over the business of Cramer Security. Whenever your relief officer comes in, make sure that you have a list of things to tell them. Do not assume that they'll just read your notes. Make sure that you have a list prepared to let them know what's important for that day. Maintaining safety. Again, make sure that you check your communications. Again, this is redundant, but we want to make sure that if you have communications equipment, it's working, because if you have it, it's there for a reason. Know what you have. If you have a sense of any kind of danger, any kind of strikes in the area you're at, any kind of special equipment on that site that hasn't been there before, make sure that you know what you need to be safe. Know where your cover areas are. Know where your concealment areas are. Know where your best visibility is to stay safe. Have a good route of escape. Now, we don't want you running from everybody, but we do want you to have a route of escape. If things get real bad, we don't want you hurt. If other officers in the area, make sure that you know about where they're supposed to be. If they're on a moving patrol, make sure you know the general area that they're patrolling. Next, we'll begin with manual unit number 6, if you're using the manuals. And that has to do with physical security and crime prevention. The objectives for you as a student is, first of all, to know physical security process. Second, we're going to go over the military model of defense lines. Much like a military unit moving, there is a security system that uses a military model of defense. We're also going to go over barriers, lighting, fencing, gates, and locks. We're going to address aggressive protection, physical security. We have what's called soft techniques. These are rules and procedures. The reason they're called soft techniques is because it's nothing you're actually going to be using physically in your hands, but it is the rules and procedures that you will be using. Then you have the hard techniques. Technology such as the locks, the lighting, the alarms, the fences, anything that is a technique that uses tools, that's a hard technique. Physical security is, in large part, the difference between police and security work. Now we'll start looking at the military model. The military model is based on having defensive lines, much like when a military unit sets up out in an enemy territory, or if they're just defending their buildings. Your first line of defense is your property line. That property line itself is a line of defense. That is the area that you have to secure. That's the area that you have that you work with. The second line of defense is the exterior of the building. Either the buildings that are on the outlying parts of the property, or it may be the building that you're in, depending on how large of an area you're securing. But that second line is the exterior of the buildings. And then you have the third line. That's the interior controls in place. Those are the things such as alarms, video cameras. That's your third line. It's the most inner line of defense. Now let's look at the physical security process. There are some critical factors of threat assessment. The probability and the criticality. The steps to determine the critical factors is What is being protected? You need to decide what is the most crucial part of what you are protecting. And then, almost like setting priorities, go down from there. The second priority, the third priority. You need to expose loss events or situations. Expose them, figure out what they are, and find a solution to them. What is the probability of these events happening? Understand the impact. If you have a large loss as opposed to a small loss, you need to make sure that the larger one is what you protect with the most attention. Then you need to come up with countermeasures needed for threats. Countermeasures are such things as barriers, lighting, locks, alarms, fencing. I could explain what all these are individually, but that would be kind of redundant. You also have the gates. Now, not all of your areas have gates. Some of the areas that I've helped work on for Cramer Security, we have wanted them to put in gates. They'll have large fences with no gates. But that is one of the physical barriers. Physical barriers define the property. We need to know what the boundaries of the property that we are protecting are. They help deter entry from people that aren't supposed to be in there. They delay entry and give us time to react and do what we're supposed to do. The barriers can channel and direct the flow of traffic. We need to make sure that we help in deploying and utilizing these barriers. We need to use tact. Sometimes people don't like our barriers. We need to make sure that they're tactfully placed. Lighting, believe it or not, can be a barrier. If somebody doesn't want to be seen, they don't want to be in the light. Lighting enhances security as a psychological deterrent. It can be a physical deterrent as well. Some of the factors to look at when you're considering your lighting is the size of the lighting that you need, the contrast or the brightness. Make sure that you have lighting that covers the area that you're wanting to be seen. The time of day. There are some times of an evening that you need lighting even when they won't kick on automatically. The lighting types. They can be very important. There are 4 basic categories to protective lighting. And these are just basic categories. But number 1, you have a continuous lighting. They're fixed. They have overlapping zones. Just as one set of lighting starts to get gray, another set of lighting, the circle of light, comes into play, and it covers a complete area. You have standby lighting. They're only on for specific applications. If somebody's working in an area, they light it up. If they're not working in that area, there's nothing crucial there, they shut the lights off. They have movable lighting. Manually operated, usually used for short term. Many of the mine sites will have movable lighting because some areas won't need lighting. Emergency lighting has its own power. It's used whenever the power goes off to make sure that we can still see, to maintain security or the company to do their work. Now let's look at locks. There's some components that must be checked by officers. First of all, the operating parts of a lock. I'm not going to get in depth and in detail to all the little detailed parts of a lock, but you have the keying parts or the doorknobs. That's where the key goes in. You have to check these things for wearing or tampering or even weather malfunctions. Sometimes ice can freeze over them and you won't be able to get into where you're supposed to. Alarms. There are various types of alarms. Some of the work sites that we have use alarm systems, and some of the work sites we are the alarms. If you do have some type of alarm system, make sure that you check its operation and check for signs of problems. The fencing. There are 3 basic types of fencing used in most security. Number 1 is your chain link fence. That is the most common for our security purposes. Many of the sites that you secure will have a chain link fence to show the area that is most needed to be secured. Barbed wire fence, not as common for security purposes, but sometimes, believe it or not, they use it interwoven with the chain link. Then you have the barbed or concertina wire. Sometimes it's used at the top of the chain link. It's the ones that has the razor blades up the top of the chain link. If you have an area that has that, that's probably some of the more crucial equipment that company needs protected. Make sure that fences and gates are locked when they're not in use. Too many times people will come out and tell you, "Oh, just leave that unlocked." Don't do that. That's not part of what we expect out of you. You need to be sure to check the gates often. Make sure that when you go around to check the gates, that you check the locks. Criminals at times will cut a padlock off and replace it with their own padlock. Pay attention. If you have a key, check to see if your key opens that lock. This is something that criminals figured out real quick, and a lot of times security officers don't pay enough attention to it. We need to have good aggressive protection. Accomplishing aggressive protection is redundant in this training, but it's absolutely necessary. It's crucial to us. How do you accomplish aggressive protection? Again, know your assigned area. Many of these things, if you hear them over and over, you may even have on a test later on. Don't assume anything. We've already talked about this, but that is a big problem in security work. Check the barriers, even if you're told that they're okay. Think in concentric rings or overlapping rings. Make sure that you know that every area is covered and then double covered. Think about hazards. Stay focused on your job. Don't lose focus. It's too easy when things get quiet to daze off into some other world. Don't lose focus on this job. We need you to use your tools properly. Don't play around with the tools of the post that you're on. Don't use them for things they're not meant to be used. Even as much as your flashlights, sometimes people get to playing with them and then the batteries are dead when you need them. Use your tools properly. There's a thing called look to the light. What that means is you don't want to be standing in the middle of the light looking out into darkness. You can't see that way. You want to be in a position to where you can look into the area that's lit up and you're standing just slightly in the darkness. Make sure that you position yourself properly. Concentrate on prevention matters. Make sure that you're constantly thinking about how can I prevent something bad from happening here. Remember who you are and who you represent. Now we're going to start with manual unit number 8, if you're looking into your manuals. It has to do with criminal law and criminal liability. Our goal with Cramer Security is to keep you safe. We don't want any of you all getting hurt. There's no property out there that's worth your life or worth your well-being, but we have to do our job. We plan on doing our job as supervisors in a manner that keeps you safe. We also want to keep you safe from criminal and civil charges. We have a job that is very hard to do at times. We have to use just the right amount of force, we have to use just the right amount of technique, but if we overdo things, then you can either be criminally or civilly charged. We also need to keep Cramer Security safe, because if Cramer Security isn't safe, you lose your job, and all this is for nothing. A key point here is just follow the policy. You have a policy and procedure manual you get when you start with this job. Make sure that you read through it, make sure you know it, make sure you follow it. Let's talk about some of the commonly faced crimes for security. These may be crimes that occur to you or crimes you could get involved in, and we want to prevent that. In either case, we want to prevent crimes from happening to you or by you. So let's talk about some of those crimes. The first thing we want to address is assault. Assault is quite simply the threat with a reasonable fear of bodily harm. The threat must be reasonable, and there has to be a valid fear of bodily harm. Too many times people will threaten that they're going to do something to somebody else. They'll say it out of anger, but if that person has a valid fear, then it's a crime. Don't get involved in this. There's no physical contact in the crime of assault. It's simply a threat. The second part of those common crimes, and remember, this is just 2 of 20, we've got a few to go, but the second part is battery. Battery means that there's been physical contact of an insulting or provoking nature resulting in bodily harm or fear of bodily harm. If you so much as shove somebody, they can claim battery. The only difference between battery and assault is when they were in fear of harm because of something you said. Battery means you actually touched them. Physical contact is necessary to be guilty of battery. We don't want to get involved in either one of these. If it's not necessary, don't make comments and don't make bodily contact with people you're dealing with. Now we're going to get into some of the more serious crimes. Manslaughter. Yes, that could happen. Manslaughter is the unlawful taking of a human life without premeditation or intent to kill. The premeditation, the intent to kill, makes a big difference. Some people think, well, I didn't mean to do it. That doesn't matter. If somebody dies, it's still manslaughter. Don't rev your engine and pop the clutch on a vehicle, because if you hit somebody, it's manslaughter, even if you didn't mean to hurt them. Then you get into murder. Murder is usually premeditated. It's an intentional taking of a human life. The key here is that there are different degrees depending on the premeditation. If it can be proven that you planned it out all the way, then it's a much more serious degree. Some of the ways that they prove premeditation is the fact if there were threats made and then something happened. I think you can see why too often we need to just keep our mouths shut and be careful what we do. Now let's get into some of the property crimes. Burglary. Unlawful entry of an occupied residence with the intent to commit a crime or theft. First of all, it has to be a residence. But remember, it doesn't have to be just a theft, any kind of crime. Make sure that you don't go into places that are residences. Breaking and entering. Unlawfully entering of a building other than a residence with the intent to commit a crime or theft. If you notice, too many times people think that if they break into a building for something other than just stealing, they're okay. No. If you break into any kind of building with the intent to commit a crime, then these are felonious acts that you would be guilty of. Now we're going to go with a little less serious property crimes. Trespassing is the unlawful intrusion and remaining on the property of another after being given notice to depart. In West Virginia, the person who owns the property has the authority and must give you notice that you are trespassing. Then law enforcement must give you notice before they can make any kind of arrest. Make sure that if somebody tells you, this is my property, you need to get off of this property, and it's not the property we're supposed to be securing, you just leave. The next part that we're going to get into is criminal defamation. That is, intentionally communicating false and harmful information about another person, which ruins his or her reputation. Be careful what you put in your reports. Be careful what you say about the people that you're working around. If it ruins their reputation, you can be charged with criminal defamation. The next part is something that we have trouble with officers at times. We've not had any large problems with Cramer security, but as a law enforcement officer, I've seen this happen before. It's called false arrest. Taking somebody into custody without legal authority to detain them. You are not a police officer. We do not arrest people with Cramer security. The next one is a little more serious. Kidnapping. If you keep somebody against their will without reasonable cause, you can actually be charged with kidnapping. Now, as a security officer, usually that's not going to fly, but be careful because somebody can try to charge you with kidnapping if you start trying to hold them. There's a difference in criminal and civil crimes. Some of these can also be civil, and that on the kidnapping you can be charged with civil charges as well. Another one that we want to pay particular attention to is unlawful possession or use of a weapon. Possession and display of a weapon that is outlawed by statute. Protection officers should never carry unauthorized weapons. Make sure you pay attention to this. Even if you have a permit to carry a concealed weapon, it is illegal to carry it on private property where the property owner prohibits the weapon. Understand this. With Cramer security, we are not armed security officers, unless Tim Booth has given you special written permission for a weapon somewhere, we do not authorize you to carry weapons. Don't be saying that because you have a concealed weapons permit that you can have a weapon with you. That's not acceptable on the sites that we work. Disorderly conduct. Unreasonable behavior to alarm and disturb another in order to breach the peace. This is kind of a catch-all charge. At times, people will be charged with disorderly conduct when they're just not sure what the conduct was caused by. They just sum it all up with disorderly conduct. That's called a summary offense. The next crime is a crime of violence against a person. It's called robbery. It's when there's use of force to threaten or use of force to act in a theft. A criminal must be in the presence of the victim, and they must either threaten or use some type of force to physically take something from the victim. That is what a robbery is. The word robbery is overly used in too many thefts. The next part we'll talk about is extortion or blackmail. This is theft through intimidation or threat. The criminal is not actually in the presence of the victim, but they intimidate them to get whatever they want out of them. That is called blackmail. Eavesdropping. Intentionally monitoring the presumed private conversations of another person. Many statutes, including federal law, especially in the use of electronic devices, can get you into a lot of trouble with this. People have a reasonable expectation of privacy. If you're using something, microphone, there's a lot of things out there. You're recording somebody's conversation that you're not a part of just because you're playing games with them. Security officers at times have too much time on their hands, and they'll set up little things just to hear what's going on. It's illegal. It can be a federal charge. Don't get involved in all that. Pay attention to the job that you're supposed to be doing. Simple theft, taking possession of property of another with the intent to permanently deprive the owner of that property. I think that one's a pretty simple thing, and it's probably the most commonly occurred crime that we see when we're doing private security. Don't take things that don't belong to you. Pretty simple. Retail theft or shoplifting. Theft in a retail store. We don't work too many stores right now. We could, but right now we're focusing more on other types of security. Just realize that shoplifting is retail theft. It's a misdemeanor. It's still a larceny. Perjury, or lying or giving false testimony under oath. You also have false swearing and providing false information to a law enforcement officer. All of these are misdemeanors. Subordination of perjury, or inducing another person to commit perjury. You're trying to make somebody tell a lie under oath. That is also a crime. Remember that your notes, your reports, could all go to court. Don't put stupid stuff in your reports. Remember I keep talking about fluff earlier? Things that you put in that report. You think you're going to be cute and write something down, saw a pink butterfly. Your report could have to go to court. Make sure that they're professional. Make sure that you don't give false information in your reports. The next one is called compounding a felony. Receiving or offering money for the promise not to aid in the prosecution of an offender. If you're a witness as a security officer and then you take money not to testify, that's a crime. You can be put in jail for it. The next crime I want to talk to you about is called conspiracy. It's when you're planning or committing the furtherance of a criminal act. It can be common in drug offenses, but as a security officer, if you try to help by hiding a crime after it's been committed, for whatever reason, you can be convicted of a conspiracy charge, and it's just as bad as committing the offense in the first place. Don't get involved in trying to cover up something or trying to help somebody after the act is done. Do your job. The last thing I want to talk to you about is the possession of controlled substance. Having illegal drugs on your person can also lead to possession with intent to distribute drugs. Remember that contributing is a big factor in this. If you have the drugs, or if you've helped somebody else get them in there, then you can be charged with a felony. We will not tolerate drugs on the work site. Remember that nobody with legitimate authority within Cramer Security will ever ask you to do anything illegal. We strictly forbid any illegal or immoral acts. Steps to avoid criminal or civil charges are always being taken. We don't want you in trouble. Cramer Security definitely doesn't want to be in trouble. Act and react, do your job, and don't get lax, and there won't be any problems. Know and comply to all laws, safety regulations, and policies within Cramer Security and within the state that you live in. Understand and operate. Our policies are for your protection and ours. We will back you if you are trying to do things right. Let's go to having legal authority. I've already said this once, but I want to be sure that you understand. We do not want citizen arrests. We're not out there to arrest people. We expect you to be the eyes, the ears, and a deterrent, but we do not expect you to be a police officer. We do want you to stay safe, and we can't assure that you will be safe if you start trying to act like you think you're a police officer. There's a difference in police versus security work. Two of the big differences is in your legal authority. Let's talk about what those legal authorities are. Police may make an arrest on view or on the knowledge of a warrant. This is a responsibility you really do not even want. I'm telling you from years of experience, it causes a lot of stress, and even when the government backs you, there's a lot of questions when you start taking somebody's right to leave. Police may use physical force, up to and including deadly force. Again, this is just something that you don't want to have the authority of because it's also a responsibility, and you really don't want that responsibility. If you think you do want that responsibility, go try to get on with a law enforcement agency because there's no place for it here with Cramer Security. Let's look at the origin of authority and the differences in police work and private security. Police authority comes from the state. The police officer is an agent of the state and of the government. A security officer's authority comes from their employer, the agent or company or the client. There's a big difference in the amount of authority that you are given there. With the police, there's a reasonable expectation that they will deal with a problem no matter what the problem is. With security officers, there are some situations we don't expect you to deal with. We just expect you to see what it is and make sure that there's some documentation of it. There's some powers too. Police may use what's called overpowering force to control somebody or to enforce laws because they are the very last line of defense. A security officer may only use neutralizing force to protect themselves or others from actual physical harm. When we're talking about the powers and the authority of security officers, we need to really look at the charge of trespassing. This is going to be one of the laws that you are in charge of enforcing for the people we work for. First of all, we need to look at the conditions of the charge of trespassing. We've already talked about this, but I want to go just a little more in depth. Remember that when you're talking to somebody that they're trespassing on property you're securing, first of all, you have to be sure that they have no legal right to be on that property. Second of all, that person that may be charged with it must be aware that they have no right. Then they need to not have permission to be on the property. Even if the property is posted, they have to be told that they have to leave. after they or the agent, which would be you, tells them that they have to leave, and a law enforcement officer arrives, then and only then can they start being charged with the violation of the trespassing law. Now let's talk about use of force again. Remember when I said that the police officers could use overpowering force as opposed to a security officer using neutralizing force? Let me give you a little example of what that means. If reasonably you feel that you or another person is in serious danger of bodily harm, you can act in a more forceful way. A case of trespassing is not you being in danger. Don't get into a physical confrontation for that. No matter what, we want to be sure that you understand that force is absolutely the last resort. Questions that you might want to answer when you're considering the use of force. First of all, what ability is there for the person you're facing to harm the officer or somebody around them? You have to have an imminent feeling of jeopardy or harm. There has to be an intent to harm another person. If you don't have some way to prove that the people you're dealing with have an intent to harm somebody, we do not want you using force. You have to make sure that there's no escape or other option except for force. Remember I said no escape. Don't let your pride get in the way. Let me tell you a few ways to avoid confrontations. First of all, your body language. It's very important. Your body language can either invite or discourage somebody to be aggressive. If you look like you don't want to be there, if you look like you're afraid of them, then it can invite them to be aggressive. Your appearance, if you're neat and you're squared away, it says to other people, I have a grasp on things. Don't mess with me right now. I'm a professional. It doesn't always work, but it can make a big difference in your life and in the job that you do for Cramer Security. Your attitude. Your attitude needs to be, I will stand up because I want to be here and I want to do my job. If you stand there looking like I'd really rather be someplace else, you're inviting people to physically try you to see if they can make you run away. Let's get into the civil law and civil liability now. The objectives of me explaining civil law and civil liability to you are this. The student, which is you, will know how to explain negligence and how it relates to the security profession. There's some difference in being negligent and bad things happening, and that's what I want to explain to you. The student will understand what liabilities are. Those are some of the, and I'm not trying to belittle anybody, liabilities can be different things. Big words with big meanings when it comes to lawyers talking about it. The student will learn how to avoid personal and corporate liabilities. Let me give you a fictional scenario to give you an example of what I mean. A security officer is to secure a certain post. They keep a tank of chemicals from being tampered with. For whatever reason, that officer leaves the post for an unapproved purpose. Some bad guy comes along and breaks in. There's a chemical spill and the bad guy gets hurt. Now let's see, criminally and civilly, is there any liability? Breaking down the scenario, we look at criminally. There's probably no charge for the guard or the company, although the guard could face negligent issues if they did not follow the policy. And remember, I did say that they were on an unapproved business. Civilly, the guard probably will face civil responsibilities, and the company that he works for quite possibly may even go through some issues because the guard was not following the rules. Now let's look at civil versus criminal law. First of all, criminal law, there's state action. The state has to prove beyond a reasonable doubt, which is usually about 99%. There can be fines, there can be imprisonment. There are extensive precautions to make sure that the defendant has all of his rights. However, civil law, on the other hand, is a private action. There are private attorneys. there has to be a preponderance of the evidence, which just quite simply means 51% that the person did something wrong. There's monetary damage, and there's what's called injunction relief to make you stop doing whatever you were doing wrong. There are few protections for the defendant. Some of those charges can be negligence, which is a failure to perform a legal duty with the result in somebody or something suffering harm. Think about that as a security officer. If you're negligent, you can suffer consequences yourself. Doors locked, entrances clear of hazards, on post, and alert when you're supposed to be. These are all things that can keep you from being negligent. Think about those. Note, we want to make sure that you do not understand. We never say that we are in an area and it is secured by us 24/7 or 24 hours a day, 7 days a week if we're not there. Too many times that's done, and then if you're not there, it can get you in a lot of trouble. Vicarious liability. Big words, huh? That just is a legal concept that an employer is responsible for the employee if the actions are done in the scope of the person's employment. A vicarious liability is quite simply, if we have a policy and you're following that policy and it's wrong, the employer is the one that suffers, not you. And that's the way you want to be. Follow the rules. Scope of employment means that you are following the rules and that you are covered by it as your job. If you don't follow the rules, it's all on you. You don't want the weight of the courts on you if you're not following the rules. An intentional tort. These are things such as assaults, battery, false imprisonment, defamation, malice prosecution, invasion of privacy, trespassing, intentional infliction of emotional distress. Do not do these things, because remember, I said that they were crimes. You can also be civilly sued for that. Don't get involved in these things. They've been defined to you in this training, and that's why we provide this training. Cramer Security does not allow this kind of conduct. Prevention and avoiding civil liability. That's what we want to do for you. And here's how it can be done. If you, quite simply, follow the work rules, don't go out on your own, ask questions, and seek clarification. Mr. Booth has provided many avenues for clarification. You've got all kinds of supervisors, you've had all kinds of training. This training session you could have asked all kinds of questions. If you have questions, it's up to you to ask them. There is no excuse for you not knowing how to keep out of civil liability and criminal liability. Let's look at what a claim must show. If somebody has a claim against you, they must show that you either acted or failed to act in a manner that you should, that you had a legal duty owed to them. You had a duty that you did not perform or that you performed wrong. You had a breach of that legal duty, and there was a foreseeable injury to them, either a real injury or an injury to their character. Actual injury and damages are often weighed by juries, and they can award big awards. It can come from you or from a company. Keys to prevent liability. We've said this over and over. I can't stress this enough. Do your job in a reasonable manner. Conduct yourself in a reasonable manner. Keep reasonable notes and records about what has occurred. I know reasonable keeps coming up, but that is a key. Keep supervisors and clients reasonably informed. Do not make detentions. Don't hold people, especially physically hold them against their will. We do not arrest people. Arresting people is one of the big ones that will get you in trouble, both criminally and civilly. Don't get involved in that. A detention happens when a person is placed in a circumstance that they reasonably believe that they are not physically able or free to leave. Reasonable depends on the circumstances. If you tell them, stay or you lose your job, you're probably going to be okay. If you tell them, you are physically not able to leave and I will keep you from leaving, then that's probably the wrong way to go about it. The use of force guidelines. Remember, it's only to protect life. Deadly force is never to protect property. Force to stop an attack, not overpowering. You use force only to stop somebody from attacking you, not to overpower them. Don't get pride involved in this. When all else has failed, as a last resort is the only time you use force. You start mild and work your way up, even when you do have to use force. Resistance is negated. You've tried milder forms, now you've got to try something a little more harsh. When in doubt, back out. It's not running away, it's getting out of a bad situation. Excessive force is in the eye of the beholder. Excessive force indicators may be: how many people were there? How big were they? How much use of force training did you have? Other person's mental or physical condition. These are all things that you need to weigh when you have a situation where you even think you might have to use physical force. Consider your resources, your alternatives, and your options. Make sure you give warnings. Let them know that there are results from their actions. If all the warnings have been given and all of your other options and alternatives have been tried, then you have to decide how much use of force to use. Now let's talk about searches and seizures. First of all, people can give a consent in 3 different ways to a search or seizure. First of all, it may be required by their employment, as is in some mines. It may be a matter of public notice. It's posted up everywhere that if they're in there, certain things can be searched. Or they can give their approval or their submission to something being searched. There are a number of search limits. Basically, the only things that are going to be searched are property belonging to the organization we're securing. Past that, we're not going to get involved in it. If there's evidence of a commission of a crime or a criminal act, then we need to get a hold of law enforcement. If there are weapons or obvious contraband, you can actually see the weapon, you can actually see the contraband, then without using physical force, you can try to take that property. If an item is in plain view, it's not considered a search. Let's talk a little bit about interrogation and interviews. You normally will not be interrogating people. You may ask them some questions, but if it gets into almost an argumentative type thing, then you need to stop. Asking questions in general is not an interrogation. When you do ask questions, make sure that you document the findings. Also make sure you document the question that was asked. Allow supervisors to decide how to proceed. When government officials are into interrogation, Miranda warnings or Miranda rights have to be given. That's in a government interview. Police officers, for example. There has to be a specific crime. The questions are what's called accusatory, or the questions are in a manner that accuse them of something. And then the rights are that they have the right to remain silent, they have a right to request an attorney, and they have the right to stop answering at any time. You don't have to get real concerned with that because we're not government officials and we're not going to be interrogating people. In summary, you need to know your job. You need to do your job. You need to follow policy while you're doing your job. Don't just be right, but appear to be right. Ask if you have any questions, at any time, even here today during this training. We want you proud of your work. We want you to feel like you are a professional. We want to thank you for what you do, and we want to provide good training and good professional officers.